Edgar stood at a crossroads. 50 years he had walked this earth, and the weight of his past pressed down on him. He had spent years constructing walls, burying memories deep within himself. But the past had a way of seeping through the cracks, haunting his waking hours and invading his dreams. Tonight, the air hung heavy with premonition. Edgar knew he could run no more. He had to confront the shadows. His decision was not born of courage, but of desperation. The years had etched lines of regret on his face, his heart heavy with the burden of unspoken truths. Sleep offered no solace, only fragmented images and echoing whispers of what was and what might have been. The time had come to face his demons, to journey into the heart of his own darkness. His studio beckoned, a sanctuary of shadows and flickering light. He had always found solace in its embrace, the scent of paint and turpentine, a familiar comfort. Tonight, however, the air felt different, charged with an unseen energy. A solitary candle burned on his desk, its flame dancing in the encroaching darkness, casting elongated shadows that seemed to writhe and twist like living things. With a deep breath, Edgar began his descent. He knew not what awaited him in the labyrinth of his past, but he was determined to emerge on the other side, free from the shackles of guilt and regret. The studio was his haven, a place where he could lose himself in the world of colors and forms. But tonight, familiarity offered no comfort. The air was thick with anticipation, the silence broken only by the frantic beating of his own heart. Moonlight spilled through the skylight, painting silver streaks across the worn floorboards. Each shadow seemed to hold its breath, watching him, waiting. Edgar moved like a spectre through his own domain, his footsteps muffled echoes in the stillness. The scent of linseed oil and turpentine, usually a source of comfort, now seemed to cling to him like a shroud. His gaze swept across the unfinished canvases that lined the walls, each one a testament to his tortured soul. He stopped before a canvas, his reflection staring back at him, a stranger in the pale moonlight. His face was haggard, etched with years of regret and unspoken truths. His eyes, once bright with youthful optimism, now held a haunted look, the reflection of a man grappling with the ghosts of his past. He had to go on. There was no turning back. This was his only chance for redemption, for finding a semblance of peace. He closed his eyes, took a shuddering breath, and stepped into the shadows. The air grew colder as Edgar ventured deeper into the labyrinth of his past. The shadows seemed to reach for him, their whispers growing louder, weaving tales of regret and despair. He walked through corridors of his mind, each turn leading him further down a path unknown. The studio had transformed. The familiar walls now seemed to close in, the air thick with a palpable sense of dread, gone with a comforting sense of his craft, replaced by the musty odor of decay and the metallic tang of fear. The shadows were no longer mere projections of light and dark. They were entities unto themselves, writhing, whispering, beckoning him forward. He reached a door, its paint peeling, the wood swollen with time and neglect. A chill ran down his spine as he realized he had no memory of this door, yet it felt intimately familiar. It emanated an aura of sorrow, of something dark and forgotten. Hesitation gripped him. What awaited him on the other side? Was he ready to face the truth that lay hidden within? He knew there was only one way to find out. With trembling fingers, he reached for the tarnished doorknob. The doorknob turned with a groan, as if protesting the secrets it was about to reveal. The door creaked open, releasing a gust of stale air that smelled of damp earth and forgotten dreams. Edgar stepped through the threshold, and the world as he knew it dissolved. He found himself on the shores of a familiar lake, the air heavy with the scent of pine needles and the mournful cry of distant loons. The sun was setting, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, casting long shadows across the water. It was a scene from his childhood, a memory etched into the deepest recesses of his mind. But something was different. A palpable sense of sorrow hung in the air. a coldness that seeped into his bones. And then he saw him, a young boy, no more than 10, sitting by the water's edge, his shoulders slumped, his head in his hands. Edgar recognized the boy. It was him, trapped in a memory he had tried to bury for decades. The memory of that day, of the accident, flooded back, bringing with it a wave of guilt and shame that threatened to drown him. He had tried to forget, to outrun the past, but it was no use. The shadows of that fateful day had followed him, haunting his every step. He stumbled back from the memory, his heart pounding, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The door stood ajar, an open wound in the fabric of his reality. He wanted to flee, to escape the agonizing grip of the past. But an unseen force drew him onward. He had to see what lay beyond the next door. The second door was crafted of iron, cold and unyielding. It was adorned with intricate carvings depicting scenes of love and loss, of promises broken and dreams shattered. As Edgar touched the icy metal, he was assailed by visions, fleeting glimpses of relationships that had crumbled under the weight of his own failings. He saw her face, etched with a pain he knew he had inflicted. Her voice, once filled with laughter, now echoed with accusations and the bitter sting of betrayal. He had promised her the world, but had only offered her a pale imitation, tainted by his own inner turmoil. Each vision was a searing indictment of his past, a testament to his inability to nurture love. The guilt gnawed at him, a ravenous beast determined to devour what remained of his soul. He had sought solace in the shadows, but they offered no escape from the consequences of his actions. Shaken but resolute, Edgar pressed on, each door he opened unveiling a new layer of his past, each one more harrowing than the last. He was lost in a labyrinth of his own making, a prison of guilt and regret, where the walls whispered accusations and the shadows mocked his pain. The third door was different. It pulsed with an ominous energy, a dark aura that sent shivers down his spine. As he reached for the handle, he was met with a resistance that felt almost physical, as if the door itself was trying to keep its secrets hidden. But Edgar was driven by a desperate need to understand, to confront the darkness that had haunted him for so long. He pushed the door open and was met with a scene of horrifying clarity. Rain lashed down on a deserted street, the asphalt slick with a sheen of blood. A figure lay crumpled on the ground, illuminated by the harsh glare of streetlights. The world seemed to hold its breath, suspended in a moment of frozen terror. And then he saw it, the blood-soaked metal, the twisted wreckage, the accusing eyes of the victim staring up at him from the pavement. The memory, long suppressed, surged to the surface, bringing with it a wave of nausea and a chilling certainty. He was responsible for the carnage before him. Panic seized him. His mind, already teetering on the precipice of madness, threatened to shatter completely. He reeled back from the vision, his stomach churning, his breath coming in short, shallow gasps. Reality itself seemed to warp and distort, the boundaries between memory and hallucination blurring into a terrifying kaleidoscope of guilt and fear. The air grew thick and cloying, making it difficult to breathe. The shadows, once content to lurk at the edges of his vision, now swirled around him, their whispers morphing into menacing growls. He stumbled backwards, his hands outstretched, searching for something, anything to anchor him to reality, but there was no escape. He was trapped in the labyrinth of his own mind, condemned to relive his darkest moments, his deepest regrets, for all eternity. The walls seemed to close in, each one a mirror reflecting his sins back at him. His past had become his present, and there was nowhere left to run. He sank to his knees, a sob escaping his lips. He was lost, drowning in a sea of his own making, the weight of his actions crushing him beneath their unbearable weight. Was this to be his fate, forever trapped in this self-made purgatory? As Edgar cowered, lost in a maelstrom of terror and despair, a chilling realization began to dawn. The shadows, the doors, the memories, they were not random. They were orchestrated, carefully curated to inflict the maximum amount of pain. Someone or something was feeding on his anguish, growing stronger with every tear he shed, every whimper of despair that escaped his lips. The air crackled with a malevolent energy, and for the first time Edgar sensed he was not alone. He looked up, his eyes scanning the swirling shadows, searching for the source of the unseen presence that watched him, toyed with him, and then he saw it. A figure began to coalesce from the darkness, its form shifting and swirling like smoke from a dying fire. It was tall and skeletal, its limbs impossibly elongated, its fingers tipped with claws that gleamed like obsidian in the dim light. Two eyes, burning with cold, malevolent intelligence, stared at him from the heart of the darkness, drinking in his fear, savoring his despair. Edgar was paralyzed with terror, his body refusing to obey the commands of his mind. He wanted to scream, to run, to fight back against the creature that feasted on his pain. But he could do nothing but watch in horrified fascination as the entity glided towards him, its movements fluid and graceful, like a predator stalking its prey. The entity spoke, its voice a raspy whisper that seemed to slither through the air, wrapping around Edgar's mind like a constricting serpent. "Welcome, Edgar," it hissed, its words dripping with a mocking amusement. "I have been expecting you." Edgar tried to speak, to demand to know what it was, what it wanted from him, but his voice died in his throat, his words choked by the oppressive atmosphere of dread that seemed to emanate from the creature. "Do not be afraid, little morsel," the entity purred, its voice a grotesque parody of comfort. "I am merely here to help you confront your past, to face the consequences of your actions." It leaned closer, its form shifting and reforming, its features becoming momentarily clearer. A grotesque caricature of a human face twisted into a mask of cruel delight. "You see, Edgar, I thrive on your pain, your guilt, your fear. You are a feast laid out before me, and I intend to savor every last bite." Terror threatened to consume Edgar, but as the creature leaned in, its fetid breath washing over him, a spark of defiance ignited within him. He had spent years running from his past, from the consequences of his actions, but no more. He would not be this creature's plaything, a vessel for its perverse amusement. He had made mistakes, yes, he had hurt people, caused pain, even death. But he was not defined by his past. He could choose to be better, to atone for his sins, to find a way to make amends for the wrongs he had committed. "You will not have me," Edgar rasped, his voice hoarse but steady. "I am not yours to control." The entity recoiled, a flicker of surprise crossing its monstrous visage. "You cannot escape your fate, little morsel," it hissed, its voice laced with a hint of warning. "Your pain is my sustenance, your fear my delight. You will succumb in the end." "We will see," Edgar said, his voice gaining strength with every word. He pushed himself to his feet, his gaze never leaving the creature's malevolent eyes. He knew this was only the beginning of his ordeal, but for the first time he felt a glimmer of hope. He would fight. He would resist. He would not allow this creature or his past to break him. The battle for his soul had begun.